Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Zach Young. I'm the president of the William F. Buckley program at Yale. Today, we are delighted to be able to host Dr. Christina Hoff Sommers. But first, I would like to just briefly describe who we are as the Buckley program and what exactly we do. So the Buckley program is an organization that was founded by Yale students a few years ago in order to promote intellectual diversity at Yale and to expand political discourse. We host debates, seminars, discussions. We fund summer internships. We also do a range of other activities. If you're interested in learning more about the Buckley program, I would suggest contacting Adam Erickson. He is our membership director, and we're also going to have a new application semester open up very soon for new Buckley fellows. Contact Adam if you're interested. We're delighted to have Dr. Christina Hoff Sommers with us. She is a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. She's also the noted author of numerous books, including Who Stole Feminism?, The War Against Boys, and Freedom Feminism. She's also a former professor of philosophy, and she has a best-selling textbook on ethics. She also has an active Twitter following, and she has been featured on MSNBC, Fox News, and a show that many of us are well aware of, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. So I could certainly say more, but I'd rather clear the floor. Please give a warm Buckley welcome for Dr. Christina Hoff Sommers.
Good afternoon or early evening. It's so wonderful to be here, a guest of the Buckley program, and to be back in New England, my old stomping ground. Are there any Patriots fans here? Oh my goodness, not too many. Oh good, back in the back, yes. Well, I'm a great Patriots fan, although I'm a little worried about the latest scandal. Did you hear about that? Well, I think it's inflated. I don't think we should worry about it. Overblown. But they should, well, I better not say this, but never mind, I will continue. This afternoon, I am going to talk about the need to reform feminism. I think it is a movement that needs an infusion of new ideas and new directions. And if you ask typical American, are you a feminist? 75% say no. People don't identify with a movement that is symbolic of the liberation of women, which is one of the great achievements of Western civilization. So I think it's time to reboot feminism. I am going to propose a new school, which I think will greatly improve the numbers of people who would identify as feminists. I call it freedom feminism. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, feminism is just fine, thank you very much. We don't need your new school of feminism. Others are thinking, others who are not fans of feminism may be thinking, why reform it? Why bother with it at all? It's so misguided and irritating. Just, it's like reforming the avian flu. Just let it go. Well, if I do my job today, I will persuade many of you, maybe most of you, I hope, that freedom feminism is our best hope. I think it provides a path away from today's very strident gender wars. I think it also can lead to a more just and happy society. So, oh, and by the way, I think it can improve your personal life, even your love life, but, and I'll touch on that. So before giving you this elixir of love, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, my background. Well, actually back in the last century, in the early 90s, I was a feminist academic in good standing. I was invited to feminist conferences. I was asked to review papers for feminist philosophy journals. My classes were cross-listed with women's studies. I was never sure why, because I didn't teach feminist theory, but I was a woman. I taught philosophy, so it was feminist philosophy, fine. But my good standing, it came to an end in 1994. I published a book called Who Stole Feminism? Now, I felt the book was strongly feminist in the classical equity sense of equality, but I rejected the idea that American women are oppressed, that we're kept down by a patriarchal oppressive system. And that was the language that was fashionable at the time. So I thought that for the most part, feminism, classical equality feminism, had been a great American success story, And as I said, to speak of women as second-class citizens or, subject to a masculine society, it just didn't seem to me to apply. In fact, it seemed absurd. So in the book, I tried to show how feminism had been taken over, in a way, at least in the academy, by a very eccentric group of gender scholars. And I do mean eccentric. At the time, for example, just one quick example, there was a feminist philosopher, and I remember looking at her textbook, and she had dedicated it to the women of my women's studies ovular in the spring of, whatever, 92. And I hadn't heard the word ovular before, and I was curious about it, and I walked to the dictionary to look it up, only to realize, before I opened the Webster, that she had made it up. She didn't like the word seminar, and you can understand why. The very essence, the root word is associated with the very essence of male power. And so she replaced it with an equivalent. Now, this was funny. It was amusing, maybe witty, maybe, but she wasn't kidding. And so anyway, in the book, I tried to show that these theorists were taking it off in too many exotic directions, leaving most women behind. And when it first came out, I received fan letters from feminists, a few, from Erica Jong, who's, I don't know if has anyone heard of Erica Jong? You still Fear of Flying, the first kind of pro-sex feminist. And Nadine Strawson, who was president of the ACLU, she wrote me a letter. Even Iris Murdoch, this wonderful, brilliant British novelist. However, for the most part, I did not receive fan mail. In fact, it would not be an exaggeration to say I was excommunicated from a religion I did not know existed. And my colleagues, and I lost some friends. I was subjected to a colorful attack for my heresies. Many feminist activist academics did not, well, they remained convinced that the American society was oppressive for women, that it was an oppressive patriarchy. They did not appreciate my pleas for moderation. And some called me a backlasher, a traitor to my gender, anti-woman, even a non-woman. One critic referred to, let's see, Christina Hoff Sommers and Margaret Thatcher, those two female impersonators. Well, just as an aside, I should tell you that this is not easy for my parents. I lost my dad recently, but my mom and dad were, my mom's still, very liberal. So, I mean, wow, you can't be more liberal than my mom and dad. And they were dismayed to find their daughter. We're all very close, but they were dismayed to find me reviled by people they admired, like, I don't know, Gloria Steinem, and then occasionally praised by people they thought were diabolical. My father would, in the car, sometimes insist on listening to Rush Limbaugh just to get his blood pressure up, you know, and get really mad. And Mother would say, darling, turn it off, it upsets you. No, not that man, turn it down. And as soon as Mom was out of the car, Dad would turn it on and get really mad. And one day he was driving, and Limbaugh had read something of mine and said, oh, well, this is good, this Christina Hoff Sommers. My dad almost lost control of the car. But whatever, you know, he remained to the end very proud of me. Every time I did anything, he would rush out and get a copy of an interview or an article. And on one occasion, I had been interviewed by Playboy magazine, and Dad wanted to see it. But what do you do when you're an 80-plus old gentleman living in, at that time, they're from California, but they were living in Vermont. California was too conservative. They went to Vermont. And in Vermont, but my dad thought, I'm not going to go. There was a little store. Everybody in the town, in this Brattleboro store, everybody knew you. So Daddy went across the border to the more less puritanical Keene, New Hampshire, to get the Playboy. But even there, he was nervous, and he felt he had to explain himself to the clerk. And he said, I'm only buying this because my daughter's in it. Well, anyway, to the topic at hand. I am not a backlasher, I hope, a traitor. No, a female impersonator, I don't think so. I am a former philosophy professor with a respect for logic, clear thinking, and rules of evidence. And I hope basic fairness. So I promise you that if I say anything the next, I hope I keep this, I was going to time myself, but I never quite got it together. Will someone raise my hand after I've gone on for 32 minutes? Okay, okay. What does that mean? You'll give me a 10-minute warning? Oh, my God. Okay. Okay. anyway, if I say anything right now that strikes you as wrong or illogical or just plain bloody minded, as the British say, give me good reasons and I'll consider your objections. And I change my mind sometimes, so I try to be intellectually open. I think it's a very crucial intellectual virtue. I don't always succeed, but I try mightily. So, freedom feminism. Freedom feminism is a style of feminism which I submit is a great improvement over what we have now. It stands for the moral, social, and legal equality of the sexes. It affirms for women what it affirms for everyone. And that would be dignity, opportunity, personal liberty. Now, it differs from most contemporary schools of feminism in one critical way. It accepts the fact that, taken as a group, the sexes are somewhat different. If freedom feminism has a first principle, it is this one. In the pursuit of happiness, men and women tend to take somewhat different paths. Now, I know some of you are going to get nervous and think essentialism, and what is she talking about? Hear me out. Now, a few years ago, I came across an article in, this was a few years ago, it was an older article. It was from 2008 in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. This article blew my mind because it had a paradoxical conclusion. It had paradoxical findings, but it seemed to me to be the closest study I'd ever seen to human reality. And let me tell you what that was. These researchers looked at 55 societies, and they compared data on gender and personality. Now, throughout the world, they found women tend, I'm not saying every single woman, there are exceptions, I'm talking about the rules. They said women tend to be more nurturing, more risk-averse, and more emotionally expressive. While men usually tend to be a little more competitive, more risk-taking, and emotionally flat. That sounds a little pejorative, let's say stoical. Now, of course, as I said, there are exceptions. I'm talking about just overall patterns. Now, the most fascinating finding was this one. They found that personality differences between men and women are the largest and most robust in the more prosperous, egalitarian, educated societies. Now, according to the authors, nations with very high levels of human development, that means, people with, a long life expectancy, high levels of literacy, education, economic wealth, these are likely to have the largest sex differences in personality. A New York Times science columnist summarized the study this way. It looks as if the personality differences between men and women are smaller in traditional cultures, in rural India or Zimbabwe, than in the Netherlands or the United States. A husband and a stay-at-home wife in patriarchal Botswana seem to be more alike than working couples in Denmark or New York. Now, why should that be? How can that be? Well, the authors of the study hypothesized that prosperity and equality bring people just greater opportunities for self-realization, for self-actualization. That if you have wealth and freedom and health and education, it empowers men and women to be who they truly are. And it is conspicuously the case that gay liberation has thrived in post-industrial advanced, highly educated societies. That's where we see the most advances for the LGBTQ community, more opportunities to embrace their identities. The cross-cultural research suggests, this is not conclusive, but to me it was very suggestive to the point of, as I said, just striking me as profound. Gender differentiation, if they're right, it's not always a sign of oppression. It can be a sign of well-being, of freedom, of happiness. Now let me give you an example. I recently read an article, this was just on a blog at the Wharton School. Someone was lamenting the paucity of women engineers, and they held up China and Russia as superior examples of equality. According to this post, quote, in China, 40% of engineers are women, and the former USSR, they account for about 58% of working engineers. I didn't check her statistics, but that's what she said. Now, the author blames workplace biases and stereotypes for the fact that women in the United States earn only about 20% of doctorates in engineering. Well, what if American women, what if it turns out that we earn fewer doctorates in engineering because we don't have to study engineering? We have more opportunities to pursue what interests us. In other words, if you're in a country where you have to study something that is so connected to your well-being and your family's survival, but what if you are a little more free economically and you can study art history or anthropology or Celtic languages? I don't know. Philosophy is what I did. Not practical, but interesting. So it may be that women have far more opportunities to pursue careers that interest them. Now, American women are behind men in engineering, but guess what? We're way ahead in both BAs and PhDs in humanities, in biology, in social sciences, health sciences, veterinary medicine. It was once almost all male. Now it's increasingly female dominated. Our best vet schools are approaching 70, 80% female. So if you look at, despite years of consciousness raising and a few generations of feminism, men and women are not doing the same things. Even if you broke down the majors at this college, you would find, for example, we talk about the wage gap. You could help close the wage gap right now today by, if you are typical, maybe you're not, but if this were a typical sample of American undergraduates, men are much more likely to study the highly remunerative majors. You can earn quite a lot if you study, let's see, the highest would be petroleum engineering, naval architecture, and metallurgy. Oh, God. Okay, it's like naval architecture, 97% men. Petroleum engineering, 87%. Now, women actually are overrepresented in fulfilling fields, I will tell you that, but lower paying. Early childhood education, 97% female. And this has hardly changed for generations. If anything, there are more women than ever. Social work, that's always been women, but now it's 88%. Communication disorders, like special needs teachers, and 94% female. And year after year, researchers at the Pew Foundation and Catherine Hakim at the London School of Economics would ask women, what is your preferred, women and men, what is your ideal? If you could have the perfect lifestyle. Now, about 20% of women want to be full-time careerists. About 20% want to stay home, and they do not wish to work unless they have to. 60%, Catherine Hakim calls them adaptives, are women who sort of want to go in and out of the workplace, and they want to balance home and family. They want to do both, but they will entail some part-time work. A majority of mothers, according to the Pew Foundation, more than 60% said they would prefer to work part-time. But fathers don't. With fathers, it was 79% said they would prefer full-time work. So now, I look at this, and I look at these changes, at these persistent differences that women do overall prevail in the caring and nurturing professions, and men are in the saving and rescuing and people-free zone professions. Now, as a freedom feminist, I respect preferences. And for me, a good society is one defined with high levels of human satisfaction, not statistical parity. And so freedom feminism stands for equality of opportunity, but it doesn't expect sameness of results. Now, I know critics, I know what they're going to say. They will say, because they've told me, your views are reactionary and harmful to women because they don't take into account how preferences are shaped by culture. Women who major in social work or education rather than petroleum engineering or metallurgy, they're not really making free choices. They are making self-defeating choices that will undermine their long-range economic well-being. Or the American Association of University Women put it this way: women's personal choices are fraught with inequities. And the AAUW speaks of women being pigeonholed into the pink-collar jobs of in health and education. And according to the National Organization for Women, powerful sexist stereotypes steer women and men towards different education, training, and career paths. Now, here's my answer to that. I agree that men and women's choices we could say they're not truly free in a society where they have little access to education, information about the world. But we don't live in that kind of society. American and European women are among the most educated, informed, self-determining people in human history. And it seems to me a little matronizing, if you will, to say that their choices are not free. I mean, how do we know whether hardline feminists at the National Organization for Women, how do we know that what they're doing was the result of free choices? Maybe there were all sorts of burdensome stereotypes promoting them in their direction. Look, I was a philosophy professor for more than 20 years. I can tell you we're not going to resolve this question about free will and determinism today. Philosophers have been debating it for more than 2,000 years. No resolution in sight. So I think for the moment, we should err on the side of common sense and credit one another with agency. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't take your little daughter or your friend, or if you're a teacher, and encourage them to try new things, try new fields, find ways to make it interesting, of course. But in the end, you have to accept the choice and maybe even accept what, as a freedom feminist, I believe that in the pursuit of happiness, men and women take somewhat different paths. And there may be a limit to how much that is going to be changed. Now, so far my point is that more than other schools of thought, I feel that freedom feminism is more respectful of men and women and just more accommodating to human reality. But I'm going to go further. I am going to say that freedom feminism is also more progressive. It is more forward-looking than other, more progressive, more liberal in a way than other forms of feminism. And let me explain by way of an example from Sweden. Now, the Swedes can be remarkably thorough in their pursuit of gender parity. Like a few years ago, there was a feminist political party that proposed a law requiring that men sit while urinating. Less messy, more equal. In 2004, the leader of Sweden's Left Party Feminist Council, Gudrun Schliemann, sounds more German, but never mind, she proposed a man tax, a special tariff to be levied on men to pay for all the violence and mayhem wrought by their sex. Men, for their part, suggested that women pay a special tax every time they crossed a bridge that men had built. I don't know, they wanted to get back at them. This would not end well for anyone. But anyway, there is a school called Igalia. Igalia is a state-sponsored school in Stockholm, and it is dedicated to eradicating the gender distinction. And in this school, there are no boys and girls, just friends and buddies. They've replaced classic fairy tales like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. Oh, no. These have been replaced by tales like two giraffes adopt some abandoned crocodile eggs. Igalia gives the children, according to one teacher, a teacher said it gives them a fantastic opportunity to be whoever they want to be. And she was very excited. They're just going to be, I don't know. I sort of see that. Do you remember that character Pat in Saturday Night Live, who was, androgynous being? But you have to see the school, and I'm going to quote someone who did see the school. It turns out that it's actually a fantastic opportunity, not for the kids, but for adults to coerce, micromanage, and police children, because children will lapse into conventional gendered play if you leave them alone for too long. And this has turned out to be a huge problem in the school. In their efforts to get the children liberated from the constraints of gender, they have had to impose their own rigid little regime of taboos. And here is how a Slate author, Natalie Rothschild, describes, I don't think this is Igalia, it's another gender-neutral classroom. It is Igalia. One Swedish school got rid of its toy cars because boys gender-coded them and ascribed the cars higher status than other toys. Another preschool removed free playtime. Free playtime turned out to be, as a pedagogue at the school put it, when children play freely, stereotyped patterns are born and cemented. So every detail of the child's interaction was micromanaged by these concerned adults. Now, again, few would deny that a parent, a teacher, should expose a child to a wide range of toys and play activities. And you want your child to develop in all sorts of ways and all possible interests. But what the Swedes are doing in some of their classrooms, this is not all their classrooms, these are some extremes. It goes beyond encouraging. It goes beyond sort of urging children to try new things. They are requiring it. Now, today, many experts on gender will tell you that tolerance, understanding, that there are gender variant kids who completely defy the stereotypes of their sex, a boy who wants to dress up like a princess, a persistent interest in a girl who, and it used to be they wanted to subject these kids to some kind of radical behavior modification. More enlightened theory says leave them alone and you know, to be, just allow them to be who they are. And as a freedom feminist, I say, yes, I agree with that, but do that for the kids who are conventionally gendered as well. Do it for both. That's why I say that I feel this is more progressive. The Swedes should extend their tolerant understanding to the gendered identity and preferences of the vast majority of children. They should be like my heroine, Vivian Gusson-Paley. Now, Vivian Gusson-Paley is a beloved kindergarten teacher, now retired. She's in her 80s. This is not just any kindergarten teacher. She won the MacArthur Genius Award. It's a genius teacher. 30 years ago, she published a classic children's book called Boys and Girls, Superheroes in the Doll Corner. Now, it's nearly impossible to imagine anyone writing a book quite like this today. She encouraged the kids in her class to try all kinds of activities, but she accepted that they would separate by gender. They always did. And at the time she wrote her book, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader were all the rage with the boys in her kindergarten class. And at the time, there was some concern that girls, you know, don't have their superheroes, and maybe we should get girls to play with Luke and Darth. And here's what she wrote. She said that it's true that the girls do not partake in the boys' superhero play. But then she looked very carefully at the doll corner. And she said that girls are interested in their own kind of domination. Boys' imaginative play, yes, it involves a lot of conflict, imaginary violence, but girls' play, it appears to be more gentle and peaceful, but this very perceptive teacher noticed that girls' fantasies can be very aggressive, exciting, intense, but different. That's equal but different. There was a lot of conflict, pesky characters, imaginary power struggles, and then she said, I love this line, mothers and princesses are as powerful as any superheroes the boys can devise. This teacher appreciated the benefits of gendered play for both children. She had no illusions about its elimination. Now, freedom feminism is inspired more by Vivian Paley, not those micromanaging, sex policing Swedish school teachers at Igalia. Now, there's still a place for sort of old-fashioned equality feminism in all of this. I mean, as a freedom feminist, I want a society where everything, all opportunities are available to women. If they want to be, I want more women CEOs or, I don't know, bullfighters. No, not bullfighters. That's so cruel. Race car drivers. I think that there are always going to be women and men who defy the stereotypes of their sex. And in a free society, you open the doors to them and find ways to allow them to pursue their happiness as they define it. So what I'm arguing is that equality of outcome is not necessarily a measure of well-being. And freedom feminism can make a place for that. Now, so far, I've tried to justify the core principle of freedom feminism, that the sexes taken as a group are different but equal. But I have very little time, but I quickly want to assert another principle, quoting, let's see, Immanuel Kant, truth is better than BS. Well, it wasn't Kant, but it's a translation of what he might have said. Truth is our Truth should be your ally. And as a freedom feminist, I care a lot about solid research. I do not think women, especially women at risk for violence or exploitation, I do not believe that women are helped by exaggeration, fake statistics, hyperbole, spin, truthiness. It just, in the end, it doesn't work. It creates a false picture. And I tell you now, with all the sincerity I can muster, today's women's movement is drowning in misinformation, if you can excuse the pun. It's saturated with advocacy data, faux narratives, factoids, fictoids. I can't take it anymore. It's just too much, and it's propaganda. Some of it is even hate propaganda against men. I mean, there's been just the outbreak of misandry, which is quite astonishing. It is saturated with phony claims. Now, how many times have you heard, a woman is cheated out of 25% of her salary, or now they say 23%, or 1 in 5 women on campus is sexually assaulted. 1 in 3 college men would rape if they were permitted, if they were allowed to do so, and wouldn't get caught. 1 in 3 American women are battered. Or my favorite of all, on Super Bowl Sunday, battery increases 40%. This was a statistic I discussed in Who's Told Feminism, and it was taken so seriously in the 90s that during the Super Bowl Classic, they actually ran an ad, I think it was 94, 95, urging men remain calm during the game. Now, it turned out, in this case, it had no truth. It was like a case of telephone tag. Somebody had said something, it got repeated, it never got corrected. One of the things I've discovered about feminist myths, they can't be corrected. As a sociologist said, they're harder to kill than a vampire. You can't, I corrected a whole bunch of them to this feminist scholar, a legal scholar, and she didn't believe me. They went right back into her book. It's called Domestic Violence Law. You can read our exchange in the Chronicle of Higher Education, because people were pretty shocked at what she did, but I digress. The fact is, these are, now, as a feminist, violence against women, exploitation, battery, rape, these are serious crimes. Women are plagued. Now, men are plagued by even more violence, not sexual violence, but other kinds of violence. I just want accuracy. And because I don't think you can have smart policies unless you have good research. Now, it's hard to get good research, I agree. There are all sorts of ways it can go wrong. The feminist research I review over and over again, the ones you keep reading about, it is laughable how poorly constructed the research is. If you've had any introduction to social science, you will see that they play every game in the book. But then if you criticize it, you're thought to be insensitive to the problem. No, it's because I care about the problem that I think women will be helped by truth. And as I said, I think truth is on the side of compassion. Falsehood is no friend. So these are genuine problems. Now, another bad thing that's happened is there is now, I see this rape culture crusade on the campus. A lot of it is a panic, like the daycare panic, or a kind of sexual McCarthyism. It frightens me that there are so many women that willfully are against giving a young man due process, and the list of young men subject to kangaroo court justice is growing. Young women at Boston University put a petition. They wanted the school to cancel Robin Thicke because he sang blurred lines and has a rape anthem, they said, which says, "I know you want it." And somebody at Slate counted about 1,000 songs that have those words, but maybe there's something more going on in that song. I've listened to it. I don't get it, but I'm missing something. Anyway, students at Harvard Law School requested trigger warnings in their classes when sexual assault was discussed. And this Harvard professor, this brilliant woman, she wrote about it in the New Yorker. She said, one student had asked a professor, please don't use the word violate, as in violate the law, because she was triggered by that. And here's what she says, this professor from Harvard. If the topic of sexual assault were to leave the law school classroom, it would be a tremendous loss, above all, to victims of sexual assault. I believe that today, campus feminism, and these are the extremes, but you all know they are there. I think they are turning, feminism is our campuses are becoming hostile environments for due process, for free expression. Social movements fueled by paranoia and fantasy tend to be toxic. So as I said, it's time to reform feminism. In conclusion, I think anybody who truly cares about the status of women around the world should be working to create a women's movement that resonates with real men and women. We need a feminism that respects truth and civil liberties, a reality-based, liberty-centered, scrupulously honest feminism could greatly help both women everywhere, in the United States, throughout the world. It could help men, women, children, everyone. Freedom feminism is my humble contribution to that effort. So thank you, friends and buddies, for listening to me. The ovular is now over.
We will be taking questions. I'm not sure, are there any other mics set up? Or is it just the one? Okay, so let's see. Does anyone have a question?
Should I stand up? Or, okay. So I was having a conversation with a few of my friends a few nights ago, and I was a bit confused as to why the Title IX process was there, why people who were raped wouldn't just go to the police and try to get the person convicted. And they told me, well, you'd have to undergo a rape kit, and that could re-traumatize or traumatize the woman who had already been a victim. And I'm curious what your views are on that, if there are ways of making the process better while not removing due process, and how to be sensitive to those things while still not compromising our sense of honesty.
A great question, and that is the question that should have been asked a long time ago. And then in that, just now, I think it was 28 wonderful Harvard law professors wrote a petition, that many, many feminists among them. And they're saying, let's do that. But the law is not. Let us stop all forms of sexual harassment, that anybody could even imagine any kind of definition of harassment. Let's take all efforts to stop it. No, the law has to be, let's do all we can to stop as much as we can, consistent with due process for the accused. You can't get away from trying to avoid false accusations, which we just happen to have a legal system developed out of the European Enlightenment, which presumes innocence. And so how do you do that? Now, you mentioned the rape kits. One thing that's frustrating to me, people now think that women at Yale, Swarthmore, Reed College, Kenyon College, they're the most at risk. If you look at the statistics that are thrown around, they're more at risk than women in the war-torn Congo. And I heard politicians, Senators McCaskill and Gillibrand, say women are most at risk on the college campus than anywhere else in the country. No, they're not. It's just false. And there's a great study, and the author, Callie Renison, looked at the data, and if you track for education and you track for college attendance, women are much more at risk in dangerous, poor neighborhoods than they are at prestigious colleges. They're greater risk. So let's just tell the truth, and then talk about how we have scarce resources. How do we allocate them? And I think rape kits are the first thing. I also think it's true a lot of women are. It used to be worse, but one of the great things that feminism did in the 70s is they raised consciousness about rape. Is that, the job is not finished. The work of feminism is not finished, because you do need people who are trained to talk to a woman who has been traumatized, because it is a special kind of hideous violation, and they need people who are trained and know the protocols and don't ask these very offensive questions. In the past, when it would be implied that it was her fault, or it was, what were you wearing, or what is your sexual history? And so we needed the women's movement. We're not finished, but all that we should be working for. But we're not. I mean, we are a little bit, but we're so carried away now. All of Washington is, with McCaskill and Gillibrand, and even the president, the White House commissions, endless amount of things to address an epidemic, which the best data we have suggests doesn't exist. There's a problem. There's not an epidemic. And the problem is far more serious outside the campus than on campus. That's all.
think the best solution would be to form a line, preferably on this side so we don't mess with the camera guys.
That's prejudicial to women. They don't like to form. No, I'm kidding.
My apologies.
Lines are patriarchal, but.
Okay.
I had an unfair advantage because I was okay, so my question is working within your premises. If we take the premise to be true that men and women take slightly different paths towards happiness, and if we also observe the second phenomenon that these two paths that are traditionally chosen, like your example of engineering and the sciences and petroleum, if based on the way the market works, those professions are higher paying than like professions in philosophy and the humanities and so forth, does that in a sense make a certain kind of economic equality impossible, or like what are the implications of those two phenomenon on equality of positions of wealth and power?
There are implications because but you have to factor more in. If you're looking at someone's overall well-being, how much they earn is certainly part of it. It's a very important part of it. But if you ask men and women, what do you care most about a job? You find big differences. Men care more about, they put high earnings almost at the top, and women, they want to be fulfilled. There's much more about, I want to help people. That's big with women. You may not like it, but that's what we write. Another thing is we have massive data about vocational interests. And you will ask men and women, would you rather spend your time, the next 2 weeks putting a machine together and taking it apart, or helping people work through problems? That I don't know if I want to do either, but never mind. Yeah, those are your choices. Now, there are men who will want to help with the problems. And there are women who can't wait to get to that machine. I am not denying that, and I know someone's going to come up and say, well, I'm a metallurgist and I'm a female. I know you're there. I've met you, and these women are fantastic. But they know they're different. They always know they are different. And just like my son knew he was different, both of them were English majors. All his fraternity brothers at Vanderbilt and the other at Penn, they were studying economics and engineering. They were English majors. And it was, I begged them to change because I thought, I still don't understand it. But anyway, the fact is, my son in his Victorian literature class, his girlfriend was a computer science major at Vanderbilt. He was an English major. Her classes were all guys and her, and his classes were him and a lot of girls. He didn't mind it, neither did she, but that was what it was. So they know they're different, but if you ask people, what are your interests, you will find far more women will say they want to work with people or living things. So biology is big with women. But you will find, electrical engineering, not so much. And now I've always thought, well, let's feminize them a little bit. A long time ago, I was at a conference and people were worried about girls not playing with computers as much as boys. That's been solved. But I said, well, why don't we have Tinkerbell computers or, make them. And people were hissing like, oh, we're not going to do that. But I thought it would have been nice, I would have liked one. But, there might be a way. I would be in favor of that, is try to find a way to make engineering. Actually, they're doing that. They're doing it at schools. They're showing girls, like, you can help people. Suppose there's an earthquake. How can you build a house that won't fall down? And, then you connect it to real world. And it's easier to engage a girl if you can make that real world connection. So I would try. I want to keep trying, but what I don't want is the government, especially, to come in, and say, oh, no gender parity, and we're going to use all these problems, and it's discrimination and a hostile environment. No, it isn't. Men and women are somewhat different, and you're not going to get statistical parity probably ever, but you can get a better, and you can get. I also think people that are in fields they're not really. They might not have been in, or often the most creative. So I like the crossover, but we should do it in a spirit of just sort of open-mindedness and good-heartedness, not this angry. Oh, it's the patriarchy. Forget it. It's not the patriarchy. It's us. Next question.
On the topic of kind of freedom, feminism's cultural element, it seemed like what you were saying is that most of the disparities we see in various jobs are due to innate preferences that maybe are somewhat cultured but are mostly the innate differences between men and women. In a job that a lot of people would say is about helping people, but may or may not be more about power and money, that is to say lawmakers, the kind of six-fold increase we've seen between the 1980s and now in terms of female lawmakers, do you think that, I mean, obviously it's still in flux, we haven't gotten to a point where, I guess, people have kind of just have self-selected for joining their various careers. What role does freedom feminism see for not merely letting women decide, okay, I guess I don't want to run for office, or men kind of tending to choose that, and how much of that is attributable to things like no one really talks about men's fitness that much. Chris Christie, a notable exception to that, or fashion, like Obama's tweed suit or something. That those are all notable for exceptions where women's clothing, dress, appearance, family status is always an issue in a way that is rarely an issue for men.
But it's an issue for women. It's interesting to us. Look at women's magazines. Men's magazines aren't about fashion. Women's are. I mean, women's magazine. Women, that is what women are interested. And I find this, not you, but I find conventional feminism to be sexist and to trivialize women's interests. And yes, men like pornography, and we're upset about that. Some women like it, but a lot of men like it. But women like bodice rippers, these romance novels. It's different, it's equal. Maybe the pornography is worse, but never mind that. I'm just saying that, so I don't what's the problem I'm not identifying?
The question is, women in public eye who are running for office are treated in an, elements come into campaigns, come into the public eye in their treatment as public officials in a way that those elements of their public life would never be a question for men. The question of women, what about the children? What about X, Y, and Z? Whereas men are never it's never assumed that a man needs to answer those questions.
Well, you know what I think? I think that it's hellish to run for office because suddenly everything about you is up for grabs. Men have been putting up with it, and for years they get different questions. And as you said, no, I don't think anyone, well, someone would, but most people would not start publicly joking about a woman's weight and making it, a constant line, and the night comic programs. But with Chris Christie, it is. So I guess my point is twofold. I don't completely disagree with you because I'm still enough of a feminist who I know there are barriers, and I know that there are attitudes, there's sexism out there, and especially women, but we're so carried away with this more extreme kind of feminism, which is almost grievance collecting and exaggerating wrongs where there are no wrongs, where there is nuance. And it's hard to study nuance. I think in the nuance there's some sexism, but I think if you're a woman, there have been very good studies from Georgetown University about men and women in politics. When women run, they will win as often as men. The electorate is not sexist. It really depends on what your positions are if you run. The big problem that they found was that women don't run. Women will say, oh, God, I'm not going to do that, and go and live in, motels in 16 cities, and leave, so we've got to find a way to. Now, I think the solution is I think more women are running because we're living longer, and now people can have like 2 careers, or even if you stayed home, the kids are gone. If you had your kids early, they're gone by the time you're 45 or 50, and political careers are something people seem to be able to go on and on. You can do that when, you can start in your 50s or 60s, not a lot of careers. So I think it might be self-correcting. We'll see. So without disagreeing with you entirely, I'm just a little more nuanced. Yes, I think women face special hassles. Men face different ones. And people have always said horrible things about one another. Who was it? I think it was Alexander Hamilton was called the bastard son of a Scottish, what was it? What was it? I don't know, some kind of a Scottish bum or something. It was true, actually, but he shouldn't have said it. A Scottish bootlegger, the bastard son of a Scottish bootlegger. So it was harsh back then for men, but women weren't running at all then. So.
Hello? Does this work? Am I just? Oh, I'm just holding this. Okay, I'm just holding this. Okay. So I think along the lines of sort of the past two questions, I am interested in how we address the fact that value is ascribed to outcomes. So let's just say men and women have different preferences and they're able to display them, but they're being manifested within a system, within structures that have already sort of, to some degree, defined the value of that outcome. So I'm thinking about, for instance, difference between the pay of a CEO versus the pay of a kindergarten teacher, right? So I'm trying to understand the intersection of feminism and income inequality, or the way that we've ascribed value to these preferences already. And honestly, I think that we're out of whack. The entire system, the value we've ascribed to certain outcomes doesn't make any sense to me, right? So even if, so I want to address I want to figure out how to address that connection. So for instance, a concrete example, I entered the business school recently. I used to be an art major, now I'm in a business. And now there's this thing called behavioral finance, which to me almost seems like a redundancy. Finance is behavioral, but there's this, so I think even entering into these different preferences, the way in which these different preferences have been defined are via maybe, I hesitate to say a masculine lens, but even the division between economics, art, English, these various definitions, these categories have been predefined in a specific way. So I'm talking about the structure of our preferences. So it's not just these preferences just exist, but they have been pre-structured, and honestly, I think with a specific framework in mind. So I want to collapse the framework.
Yeah, but just keep in mind something about the framework. If you look at men and women in the workplace, it's true, women have a big misfortune, which is that the nurturing and caring jobs are not paid that well. Now, one reason is that a lot of people are good at them. There are a lot of women who are very good at nurturing and caring, and they don't, from all over the world. They can do it, and you don't need that much training to do it compared to some other jobs. Men, however, do almost all of the dangerous jobs. Truly, if you look at the death rates of people that work on oil rigs or loggers or people out on fishing boats, or, I have never seen a woman, on a high-rise building. If I look out and the windows are being cleaned, it's always a man. There's like an invisible army of men. There's a construction site near my house, and I think they're behind schedule, so somebody panicked. Day and night, these men are working all night. It's freezing. And then it was really hot. They're just army of men working. And you find very few women who do that. So it's true structure. Now, I don't think it's just structural. I think that that men will be, if we look at our vocational schools and what the kids want to do. I visited I wrote a book called The War Against Boys, and I'm very worried about young men in school. They're not flourishing as well as girls, and that's a way in which women are doing better. And I want both to do well. And I went to this school called Aviation High School, and it's in Queens, New York. I thought I was lost. It was a gritty neighborhood. There were factories, and I thought, this can't be a school. It looked like an abandoned factory. And then I saw Aviation High School, and I went inside, and I still thought I was, because it was the quietest school. It had 2,000 kids. You could hear a pin drop. I had never been in a high school that was that quiet. Well, it has 2,000 kids. They were all in their classes. These are kids that come mostly from homes that are, the parents, a lot of Hispanic and African American, Asian parents who are poor. They go to that school, and because they like airplanes. And it's 80% boys. But they love it, and they love it so much that they don't goof off. The reason they're quiet is if they don't, and they have to take serious academic classes. Vocational schools aren't the way they used to be. Now you can be college bound. And my point is, these kids were enthralled, and if they didn't do their math, they didn't like it that much. They didn't like their history class. They hated their English class, many of them. But if they didn't get passing grades, they couldn't tinker with the Cessna 411 or whatever it was out in the playground that FedEx had donated to them, and they get to do. But it was, these boys were enthralled. It was so. Now, there are girls there, and they're fantastic. They're sort of running the school, but they're only about 20%. They know they're different, and they are interested in the airplanes, and I would like to see more, but I don't know how you could change, and I think one problem with a lot of social science in the academy or academic feminism is they look at the economy and they just think they want a world that will never exist. There will never be a world where there isn't some kind of supply and demand, and where somebody who's a trained electrical engineer is going to earn a lot more than, Vivian Gusson Paley, my heroine, a kindergarten teacher. But there are different payoffs. Pay is one thing, fulfillment is another. So I think we always have to ask the two questions. Is your job well paid? And look at that factor. Because you know what I think? I think there are a lot of men who might have wanted to be in a rock band, or they might have wanted to pursue their career as a painter in Paris, and they went to engineering school, like those women have to do in Russia. The men are still kind of have to do it. So I think it's complex. That's all I'm saying. When I bring up all these variables, I want a feminism that looks at the whole picture, is fair to both sexes, but most of all, is faithful as possible to the truth. Yes.
So I agree with you in general. I do think there are some differences between men and women, and I don't think that the fact that those differences exist means the world's going to end or women will all be oppressed. But there's been some interesting research on the way that women and men are treated differently growing up that I think is meaningful. So for instance, there's a psych study where they had microphones attached to mothers, and they listened to everything they told their children. And what they found was that when talking to boys, the mothers pretty much only used anger and frustration words when talking about emotions. They only used those terms. And with women, they use this wide variety of, disappointed, somewhat apprehensive, whatever. And you could argue, yes, that they're catering to what naturally women, whatever. But I think what I see from studies like that is that, yes, there is a starting difference, but perhaps we are blowing that up in certain areas. So yes, perhaps women in general enjoy more looking at gossip magazines, but if that's the only thing they're offered, then we're going to make a problem that maybe is 60-40 into a problem that's 90-10.
Right. Well, I don't disagree with you. As I keep saying, I've had children, and I have people used to say, oh, you have sons, that's why you're not sympathetic. I've got better than, they say you don't have a daughter. I've got better than a daughter. I've got a granddaughter. I've got Eliza, my darling, and I watch her, and brilliant, perfect in every way. And her father gave her, no, he doesn't like me to tell this story. Someone gave her a train to get her, no, he doesn't mind the story, it's someone else. He gave her a train, and he came back downstairs, Eliza, she said, Daddy, shh, I'm putting it to bed. And she, was nurturing the train. And I look at her, and I think, what do I want for this? I want everything for her. I want everything any parent wants. A grandparent, but if she excels in physics, or that would be great. But I'll tell you one other thing about girls that's very interesting, and maybe at this school particularly interesting. There's a group of people. They're now at Vanderbilt. They used to be at Johns Hopkins, and they study prodigies, math, and mostly math and language prodigies. These are kids that get like perfect scores on the SAT in 7th grade. The SAT can't even measure what they know. These are the top 1%, genius kids. Big difference between the girls and boys. The boys, if a boy is a math prodigy, it's almost certain to go into a math career or a science career. The girls, you never know. You can have a girl who's a math genius, but because the boys have they call it an asymmetrical cognitive profile. A boy can be a math genius, but his verbal skills may not be very good. The girl who is a math prodigy is also often a verbal prodigy. This opens up a whole world to her. And so we lose those girls. You could say lose. We lose them. They could become short story writers. They could become kindergarten teachers. They can do anything. And so they have a richer field, just more complicated pursuits. So I just want to look at that without always from the point of view of, oh, the women are the have-nots. I think if you look at men and women right now in the United States, it's a complicated mix of burdens and benefits. I want to look at both, and I want to make it better if we can. Let's maybe find a way that women can earn more for doing the things they like, but men too. And I want to find a way to be a little more protective of men who are killing themselves. Lots of men who are killing themselves in these jobs, and that you can't really do after you're 40. You're just ruined. A lot of them, and we're looking now, huge numbers of men are out of the economy. We have, I think, of more than almost any, not any country, but our countries in the OECD, we have more men out of the labor force, and a lot of it is disability and so forth. So it's a complicated picture, I do not think that hardline feminism is the right perspective. There was a time where it was so rigged against women, it was so arbitrary, had to be fixed. So we developed a feminist network. We developed institutions. We needed them. But you know what's happened? There's this huge sort of structural asymmetry now. You have all of these women's organizations and almost nothing for men. And men do have problems, I tell you. Boys in school is the first I will speak about. And the women's groups never give up. But it turns out activist organizations never say, oh, our job's done, let's move out. No, if anything, they become more desperate. And this is what I've seen. A lot of the false statistics are disseminated by women's groups who want, and their own interests depend on, I mean, I don't say they're doing it for mercenary reasons. It's sort of a combination of self-interest and ideology and narrative. They want to believe, and we've got so much of that right now. That's our problem. So I don't know if I answered your question. Maybe I filibustered. Yeah.
Hi. What do you think are the most important feminist issues in the United States today? And do you have any policy suggestions for how to fix them?
I see two big problems. Well, the first thing I want to say is to me, if I were Tsarina of the women's movement, and I'm not, freedom feminism, it's me and, I don't know, some random Twitter followers who like it, maybe some of you. I don't have a following, I'm not the Tsarina. But if I were in charge, I first of all would say that our focus should be outside the United States. And I say this because we've had two waves of feminism. We pretty much have it. You can pretty much, it's not perfect, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You can pretty much do what you want. And yeah, there's still some jerks out there and troglodytes and little pockets of sexism, but overall, you have a fair shot in this country compared to almost any place in the world. And but there are societies, and I've been to several international women's conferences where they have not had a first wave, a second wave. They have not had so much as a trickle of feminism. And who do I meet at these conferences? I meet the Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the Susan B. Anthony. I meet them from you know, it could be from Angola, it could be from Cambodia. These are the most inspiring women, and they're these fantastic women from Iran who are putting up with a kind of 1984 for women. It's despotic what the women have to put up with. And they come to these conferences and they want to make common, they want to do what we did here. And they want inspiration. So to me, that would be the first thing. I think that we should appreciate what we have, figure out how we got it, and help other women who want it. So, but here, I think the unfinished work of feminism, one is, to me, there's a lot of sexism in the popular culture. There's a lot of misandry and trash talk about men, but I think that women are, and one of the questioners brought it up, even in political campaigns, there are just special ways in which women are viewed in a sexist way that people kind of take for granted. And I still think it's worth questioning and understanding it better. The other thing, more important, is what economists call the feminization of poverty. If you look at who's really poor in this society, it's mostly women and children. Now, one of the things I would like in my feminist movement would be more inclusive, to get the best ideas from conservatives, libertarians, people that have been left out, religious women. And I have no time to go into this, but there's another person who inspired me, is this historian at Brandeis University, and she wrote this history of the women's movement, and she said the women in the United States made the greatest progress when conservative women worked with liberal women. She called it 2 paths to freedom. I'm blanking out on her name. Janet, it'll come to me in a second. 2 paths to freedom. When more conservative women got together with radical women and they worked together. And I could see that if we had a more inclusive, right now feminism is pretty much it's pretty much women identified from the far left. Even on campus, the women's center is supposed to be a safe place for women. It's not really a safe place for a traditionally religious woman, a conservative woman. It's a safe space for people who think exactly the way I do, and I'm radical, and if you're not welcome. Not in all of them. I'm sure it's not true at Yale, but no, at other schools. So I'd want it to be more inclusive, and then start solving problems. Look at the feminization of poverty. Now, a typical liberal, we need to give more support to women, single mothers. A conservative would say, yes, I want to give them support, but we've probably got to look at stabilizing families. Because it just turns out, I'm sorry to say, it appears to be the case, but in this case, liberal and conservative sociologists are sort of coming to the same conclusion. It's very hard to succeed and to make it into the middle class, A, if you don't have some education beyond high school, and B, if you have a broken family. And if you don't have the education and a broken family, you're stuck. So how do we mend the families? And I don't say I never hear it, but I rarely hear that from feminists, admitting the need. And I don't say they can't be gay families, they can be any kind of family, but they have to be, you have to have at least two people looking after those kids, bringing in income, probably canceling out each other's manias. You need two people. And we have a divorced society, and we have kids who are brought up, and it takes a distinct toll on boys, I'll tell you that, but it's another story, girls in another way. So I think conservatives could bring that in, and libertarians would be there to keep us careful from not creating a nanny state where none of us are free and ending up like a Galia or something in Sweden. So I want feminism to have that, to be more diverse and more women's voices. And I think when conservative and left-wing women come together, watch out. And history, actually, I have no time to go into this, but we won the vote because Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, the women weren't demanding it. And we even organized against their own suffrage. Nobody ever saw anything. Women organized against their own vote. How could that be? Well, it took a woman, Frances Willard, who was the president of the Christian Temperance Union. And she went out and told women that it was their, she said that they were like domestic heroines, and they had to, just as they were presided over their house, they had to preside over the nation. It was their moral responsibility. And she rebranded the ballot as the Family Protection Act, because one of the reasons they wanted women to vote is that, there was so much that was dysfunctional in the society. But anyway, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony sort of did it from abstract principles of equality, which was great. We needed that. And Frances Willard did it from a kind of maternal feminism, that women are nurturers and the nation needs nurturers, and she brought them together. So I think that would be empowering. So I guess that's a third principle. I would change the women's movement and open it up to more women and certainly try to bring in more women of color, because the women's movement, the organized women's movement, is largely sort of a white elite movement. And they have not, they say when they do polls, there are not a lot of women that turn up from poor women or women from different ethnicities. So it's not inclusive. I would try to make it inclusive. Then I would look at the misogyny. I would look at the poverty, and come up, I'm not saying we're going to solve it, but I think we have a better chance.
So since we're running a little short of time, but I definitely know you guys are waiting, and I want everyone to get a question.
I'm going to give shorter answers, I promise.
Or what I was going to propose, if this is all right with you, is for each of you to say your question, and then you could try to incorporate an answer to each of them quickly, or maybe all together if there's some overlap. Is that fine with you guys?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So I kind of want to go back to a point you kind of glossed over and really unpack the statement. So one of the key tenets, I think, of how people think about gender today academically is that gender, as opposed to sex, is something that's learned and then performed. And you kind of glossed over that assertion that gender is learned through culture by saying very quickly, we could say that they're not truly free in a society where they have little access to education and information about the world, but we don't live in that society. American and European women are among the most self-educated people in human history. But that seems incongruous with the statement from earlier that I think it was 40% of, Chinese engineers are women. China has a top education program higher than the United States. And it seems incongruous with the fact that children obviously are not educated. They're in the process of receiving their education. But they're certainly not as educated as adult women and unable to kind of differentiate culture between what they might learn in an academic setting. So I was wondering if you could talk more about your rationale for this kind of bold assertion that American and European women are immune to cultural promotions of gender, and that how that doesn't affect their choices, and how their choices are solely based or primarily based on innate gender differences.
Okay. Can I answer that quickly? Oh, I hope this is quick. And then I promise I'll get to you. American women, we're constantly exposed to these roles being contested. And your generation has never has there been a generation that was more debated and questioned and different kinds of role models, a whole array. So to me, if a young woman comes to me and says that she wants to major in early childhood education, and I say, well, have you thought about that? And why do you want to, I mean, it's possible that she hasn't, and I could raise her consciousness and she'd go become a chemical engineer. But I suspect I'm going to credit her with being part of this conversation, being part of this world. There's no possible world where we don't have influences. You can't set the standard for freedom so high that it means that we're all just enslaved by culture. I mean, maybe we are. I'm a philosopher. It's perfectly possible. A lot of things are possible metaphysically, but not resolved. So this whole question of freedom, it seems to me, though, as a kind of soft determinist, we could say that in a country where you have choices and where you're exposed, I will say you're more self-determining, where you never heard of the possibility that a woman shouldn't stay home and have children. No one ever did it in the history of your village. That would be different. And it was a little bit like that in the United States. It changed. So that's why I'm a strong proponent of a lot of things that we got from first and second wave feminism. But as I said, it just turns out at a certain point you have to look around and say, so what did women do with freedom? Well, we did a lot of things, but we didn't become men. And it appears we don't want to. Some of us do, majority don't. So I take that seriously. And does that answer you? Maybe it doesn't. Oh, and I want to say one other thing. I do think it is partly biological. I think it's cultural. But I think it's so naive in gender studies where they say it's a social construction. I mean, it seems to me that's biologically naive not to know about the role of testosterone and hormones and the play patterns. People say, oh, well, children are socially constructed, by the Toys R Us catalog. This is blue and this is pink. But they've looked at vervet monkeys, and the female monkeys will gravitate towards the dolly or the plush toy, and the males will go to a gadget or something. I mean, how do you explain that? They didn't read the Toys R Us catalog. There's something that does impel us. There is. Now, I don't say biology is destiny, but it's something, and it's in us. And I think, and this is just a subversive idea, but you know what I think? I think in a free, prosperous society, you can sort of go with it. If you have, not everybody is a girly girl, but if you are, there's a place for you, and you can, or gay, or anything on the spectrum, you can do it. And it seems to me we've become a society now where we're very disapproving of those who are conventional. And I just say, let's embrace it. But I'm not disagreeing with you. We should keep informing people. And I will tell my granddaughter about metallurgy. But I don't think there's a chance, but I think I see an English teacher there. But go on.
To clarify real fast, when you say, just like yes or no, when you say a free, prosperous society, you're indicating the United States, right?
No, I'm indicating Sweden, Australia, Canada, France. I mean, even Japan and China, the post-industrial societies where people have high levels of education, life expectancy, all the things we would agree are goods. You want to watch, what do people do? I watch what people do. There was a great article I keep talking about Slate, I don't know why, but I like it. It's great, actually. But anyway, it was about Holland, the country that feminism forgot. And it sounds pretty good. I read about Holland, and I thought, oh, maybe I'm not going to, well, I had been there, and I liked it, but I thought, oh, maybe there's something amiss here. And it just turns out the women, they almost all work part-time. And even those without children. And they have a whole culture around gezellig, making the house cozy, making everything gezellig. And they love it. They go with their girlfriends, their teas, and it's just happy little thriving place. I'm sure there's some Dutch feminists who would disagree with me. But when they take polls, they get very high levels of happiness. So I'm just, and you see in Sweden, they have all of these services that American women, especially feminists, say, oh, we should have all these, the government should do this. And they do it in Sweden. We're ahead of Sweden when it comes to women advancing in managerial positions because we have to, and we don't have. But I looked at Sweden and I thought, gee, I would like to have those things, but I think it would exaggerate the sex difference rather than make us more the same, because if you give women the opportunity to stay home with their kids, a lot of women will take it, and very few men will. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm kind of lazy. I didn't want to stand up and wait the whole time. Sorry. So some of what you say is great, and I like the tone you take. It's refreshing. But do you not see, even when you said maybe my granddaughter will be a metallurgist, you kind of did a shrug and then
Well,
a
just
pass,
because I know her,
like
and
a
there's
face. Sure.
yeah.
One question.
You're right. You're right.
And then
I don't want
also,
Eliza to see that.
every time you mention computer science, and I'm not blaming the audience, we laughed as an audience. Your son who did English, and we weren't judging your son. We just kind of laughed because it's kind of funny. And when you ask,
because it's different, we know it's different.
well, I know, but when you ask, we can't really explain why it's funny, but we're just so used to it. So I think that in this presentation, in which you used humor beautifully, which I really enjoyed, I think that the fact that we found this funny kind of shows that we already do have these biases against these things. Do you not
could be
agree?
right. It could be that we know our biases, or it could be we know ourselves. And that's what I don't know. I'm open. I'm open.
A point that you brought up that I was glad you discussed was how mainstream feminism is not accommodating to women of color. And you also talked about diversity of voices. So I have a question about which voices are heard in your form of feminism, and how freedom feminism accommodates trans women or disabled women or women of color. So who does your feminism seek to empower?
Mine is very separate, so I'd like for you to answer that first.
Oh.
Sure. Well, my question is, you talked about why families need two parents, and I come from a single-parent household. Many of my friends did in high school. I graduated in the top 10% of my high school, and I just want you to, and before you relate it to race, my mother is white, and before you relate it to socioeconomic status, we're middle class. So I just wanted to have you explain why she was inept at raising a child.
Oh, okay. First of all, I didn't say all children. I think you just better look at the data before you want to go around suggesting your model. My sister raised three kids by herself. Oh, how I could forget Vanessa like that. She raised 3 kids by herself. It was hard. It was a challenge. But many, many mothers make fantastic accommodation, and they cope. But overall, as a policy, it's not working. Yes, it works for very gifted middle-class people with lots of social support, and it certainly works well for like Hollywood actresses or having their 3rd child on their own. Whatever, it works. But as a policy, it keeps women and children poor. And what you just said is scary to me, because that attitude, I see it so often, and I hear liberal and conservative statisticians and sociologists worry that we're normalizing something that does not work for most kids, and it takes a high toll on women, and will keep poor. It's fine, and I admire these mothers, and in my own family I see it up close, but we've got to mend our families. It's not in the long run. Do you know that our families are less stable than they are in Europe, where they don't even get married? Marriage is just passé in France and Sweden, but they stay together. And we're crazy about marriage. People get married and they split up all the time. So we have to figure that out. I don't have an answer. But as a policy, you show me data that I'm wrong and I'll reconsider, but you got to look at my data too.
Okay, well, I would love to have some links to your data,
Okay.
and thank you for your answer. Please answer first.
Oh yeah, no, of course, I do want it to be inclusive, and when I look back at I mentioned Frances Willard, who organized women to get the vote, and the women's movement with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony was kind of an elite movement in New England societies in their drawing rooms. Elizabeth Willard had working class women. She had chapters of African American women, Hispanic women. It was a grassroots movement that went throughout the whole society, and it changed the society. Now, we needed those women in New England in their drawing rooms. They were playing an important role. But that they were two streams. But most women sort of resonated with a style of feminism that was more sympathetic to domesticity. They wanted to be wives and mothers. Many of them wanted to be in their homes. They didn't want to be working. A lot of working class women were afraid of the vote because they thought that they wanted to be, feminists speak disparagingly of women in the 19th century were angels in the house. This is supposed to be a bad thing. It wasn't, the women didn't think it was a bad thing. They wanted to be those angels. They wanted to be in the house. They didn't want to be in the fields. They didn't want to be in the factories. It was an achievement to be taking care of your own home. And Frances Willard understood that for what that meant to women across the political spectrum, across the economic spectrum. So I think in inclusive feminism, you're probably going to have to allow religious women. If you allow religious women, you're going to get a lot of women of color because you do find a lot of women who are, you're going to get Catholic women. It'll become more diverse. We've got to have a more diverse movement.
So how does freedom feminism account for trans women and disabled women?
Well, I think they're fine. and here's why here's why I find it so interesting is I'm reading a lot of literature about transgender, and I think it's going to turn out to be devastating to a lot of conventional feminist analysis, that gender is a social construction. Because there are children who are born, and I think that we're born with an identity of our gender, and we want to be that gender, but there's different wiring in some kids. It's like some kids are born left-handed, some kids are born transgendered, and they don't fit the body. But they have the soul of a little girl. They have the aspirations. They have, and well, I don't know what that is exactly, but I know it's real because I had it. So when I talk to them, what they're describing is what I had. I wouldn't have wanted, and it's so real to me, and it conforms to what I've been reading. So I could be wrong about this. I mean, I'm not. I know there's a lot of radicalism in the transgender movement, and they might not welcome being allied with me. However, it seems like I have a lot of Twitter followers who are trans, and they're very excited about it and happy. So I'm at peace with that, and I think it's going to be helpful for freedom feminism.